Do you have continuity or association plan for your business?
Has anyone shared the concept of sustainability with you?
What about the need to protect the rights of minority shareholders?
What are those ingredients germane to having effective meetings?
For these and many more, tune into Corporate Governance Platform every Thursday on MITV, your darling station, on DSTV 255 and UHF 43 at 4:30 p.m.
Corporate Governance Platform is your best medium for informative and educative strategies for the practice of the corporate governance profession.
Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.
Hello and thanks for joining your favorite program on TV, Corporate Governance Platform. The program is proudly brought to you by the Institute of the Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals. And we are reaching you live from MITV in Lagos. I am Dr. Tunde Odeyemi. Our conversation this evening is going to be focusing around the role of the board as a provider of entrepreneurial and strategic leadership for the company. And to lead in the conversation is a very distinguished member of the Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, an expert in the field of corporate governance, and of course the immediate past registrar and chief executive officer of the Association of Corporate Governance Professionals of Nigeria, and is currently the CEO, chief executive of Euro School of Business and Governance, Dr. Olufemi Mosaku-Jojnson. Dr. Mosaku-Jojnson, it's nice to have you on Corporate Governance Platform.
Thanks for having me. I'm glad to be here.
Okay, we are going to be discussing something that is very important, or something that corporate governance doesn't joke with. That is the issue of the board.
Yes.
So we're going to be looking at the board as provider of entrepreneurial and strategic leadership for the entire company. Now, talking about the board, director comes to mind. Let us start this conversation by asking, who really are the directors of company?
Directors of the companies are the persons that are elected or selected, as the case may be, to run the affairs of the organization. To them lies the role of leadership of every organization. The policy, the vision, the direction that the organization will go squarely lies on the directors of the organization. And it is very, very important for them to know that their role has a legal implication. Their mission and their commission basically is very, very critical, because they are liable for whatever they do or whatever they do not do. This is very, very important. I remember there was a time I was running a program called Director and the Law. So when directors come for the program, I tell them that the program you come for basically is how to save directors from going to prison. As a matter of fact, yes, when you go to prison, sincerely speaking, there are a lot of directors there who are there for precarious liability, for offenses that they never committed, but for the fact that they are directors, they are held liable, jointly or severally, for the offense that is committed by that organization. So whatever happens to that organization, directors of the companies are held liable for the offense, and they are there to guide the organization to ensure that the right thing is done in terms of compliance, in terms of regulatory provision, and some of those areas that are very, very critical, especially the ones that are mentioned by the Code of Corporate Governance. So it is very, very important.
So the director's role is that critical that they could go to jail because of an offense they did not commit. that is wonderful.
Absolutely.
Okay, an effective board is necessary for the company to be successful, right?
Yes.
Now, can you explain the term effectiveness in relation to the activities of the board of directors?
So as a matter of fact, when a board is coming together, they need to be assessing themselves on a regular basis to ensure that they are basically effective. Effective in the sense that they are basically meeting on their targets. They are basically also ensuring that they are making efforts to see to it that the results of the organization are being met. So they are effective when they set a goal and they are meeting their goal. When they set out a vision, let me define vision. Vision is a picture of the future. When directors sit and they debate on issues, they arrive at decisions and so on, that should hinge on their vision. And by the time they are meeting on their vision, they are meeting the requirements of their vision, they are actually getting to the point of effectiveness. So it is very, very important. Leadership role is very, very pivotal in all this in order for them to be effective. Of course, we have series of organizations who are board. The board is basically not doing what they needed to do. All that they need to do is to come together and put themselves in the position where they can put some measurements on the table, because if you cannot measure it, you cannot manage it. So if you manage, then from there you'll be able to know if you are actually achieving results or not. If you don't have measurement and so on, it's like you are having a football match and there's no goalpost. So it is not going to go well for that organization. So there has to be a goalpost. From there they'll be able to measure them. And there is also a provision in the Code of Corporate Governance, in the code, that says that every organization should be evaluating its directors on biannual basis, which is very, very important. On once in 2 years, every organization should be able to, if you cannot do it, then it has to get somebody to do it for the organization, to do it for them, to ensure that they evaluate the board, to see that they are basically effective in what they set out to be doing. This
okay, for us to determine that effectiveness, there must be evaluation.
Yes.
Okay, before I go into my next question, I'd like to give opportunity to our viewers once again to be part of the show by asking questions or making comments on this show. To do that, you just need to send a text message to 080-2323-1287. Text message only, please, no phone calls, to 080-2323-1287. And we are discussing the role of the board as a provider of entrepreneurial and strategic leadership for the organization. Of course, we have Dr. Olufemi Mosaku-Jojnson in the studio, providing answers to all our questions. Now, we have seen that the fact that board needs to be effective, yes, in order for the company to be successful. And you have said that they provide leadership role. Now, what corporate governance, in quotes, what corporate governance role would you ascribe for directors of organizations to play for the success of that organization?
Yes, it is very, very critical for the board to play corporate governance role. The first role of corporate governance is to ensure integrity in operation of the organization. The second one is to ensure that everything that organization does, it is done in an ethical manner, which is very, very critical. So directors must ensure that this is in place for every organization. And as they are moving on, they must also ensure that sound corporate governance principles are in place, especially the tenets of separation of power and checks and balance. It is very, very important that we look at those issues that relates to separation of powers within the board and within the organization. The issue that relates to sound judgment of checks and balances is very, very important. And also, directors should also be very, very proficient in the rules of conflict of interest. They must be able to look at this. It is very, very critical. In fact, there is no way the director of organization can do away with those tenets that I've mentioned. So it is very, very critical, especially conflict of interest. They have to see to it that people, the insider trading and so many other abnormalities are not basically rear their eggs, ugly eggs in the organization. They must ensure that this is basically done in order to ensure that they are very, very transparent in all they are doing. And as a matter of fact, we used to talk about FAT in provision of corporate governance and so on. And we sum it up and we call it FAT, F-A-R-T. F for fairness. It is very, very important that directors...
Okay, the FAT is an acronym.
Acronym, okay. FAT. F for fairness. A for accountability. R for responsibility, and T for transparency. It is very, very critical that all directors are at home with some of these tenets, and they must ensure that on regular basis they are reminding the organization that this is why we are here. We are here to basically follow the tenets of corporate. There's no way you can have organization that has a board and they are not going to understand the component, the tenets and the principles of corporate governance. So the fact is very, very important. You have to be fair in all your dealings. You have to ensure that there is no conflict of interest. Accountability matters a lot. There must be checks and balances in all that we are doing. Sense of responsibility, especially financial and fiscal policy procedures has to be in place, and an audit of the account of the organization. Then transparency in all they are doing. You cannot just bring things that are very, very inappropriate to the organization. Allow your wife to be supplying the diesel for the organization, making your son to be financial secretary of the board that you are, and some of those areas that are critical to conflict of interest has to be looked into, and they should be able to put down their feet and say this is corporate governance and this is the way the organization is supposed to go, which is very, very important.
Okay, you have said it that the corporate governance role expected from the directors, you summed it up in fact, which is fairness, accountability, yes, responsibility and transparency. Now, the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance of 2018 also saddled director with the responsibilities of considering and approving long-term and short-term strategies for the business and for monitoring and implementation of those strategies. Now, what are long-term and short-term strategies, and how can an organization get both the long-term and the short-term strategies right?
So it is very, very important that the board should know that they are saddled with the responsibility of drafting a vision for the organization. It can be long-term, it can be short-term for the organization. The short-term are the ones that happens on a regular basis within the concept of the organization. This is what we want to do, and this is how we are going to do it. And the organization will be monitoring to ensure that these guidelines, these visions are actually being implemented. Then the long-term goal of the organization is to look at the organization and say, in 3 years' time, in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time, what are we going to be looking at? What are we going to be talking about? Where are we going to be in the market? What share are we going to be having? What are the strategies that we are going to put in place to ensure that we leave red ocean to blue ocean? What are the strategies are we going to put in place to ensure that we are able to get the kind of talents that we need in 5 years' time, in 10 years' time? What are some of the competitive strategy procedures that we need to put in place to ensure that we are able to compete effectively in that industry? And that is the pivotal role of entrepreneurial vision of the director, to be able to see what do we have 5 years time, 10 years time, 20 years time, what we have. And the issue of succession planning is very, very key to the strategic plan of the organization. If we have this organization in 10 years, and what are we going to be talking about? We have directors now. After these directors, what is going to happen to the organization? After 10 years, what is going to happen? We have organizations in other countries that are running 100 years, 200 years, and so on. I put the picture of the 10 oldest companies in the world. 4 of them are in Japan. One of them is over 1,500 years, and it is still running. Yes, it is still running. One is 1,480 years, and the organization is still running. They are in Japan. They are up to today. They are still running, and they are doing very well. But we look at our country succession planning issue has to do with the long-term plan of the organization. It is very, very important, because I'm saying this because success without successor is suicide. So the board should look at it and say, okay, in 20 years time, in 30 years time, in 40 years time, and so on. You don't have indigenous company in Nigeria that is 100 years old. Up to today, we do not have. And it is very, very abysmal that we have a country like this and we do not have a company indigenous that is started by a Nigerian that is 100 years old. And that is because we don't have long-term plan for all these organizations, and we have to look at that. And we have to ask ourselves, ask question, ASK, attitude, skill, and knowledge for the future. What attitude do we need in the future for this organization to continue to exist? What kind of skills that are going to be needed in 20 years time, in 30 years time for this organization to continue? What kind of knowledge do we need for this organization to continue to exist? So that's.
But looking at these short-term and long-term strategies, is it not supposed to be the role of the management, why the board of directors?
As a matter of fact, we have in most cases, it is the management that drafts the long-term plan or short-term plan of the organization, but the responsibility lies with the board. Okay. It doesn't matter who drafts it. Whoever drafts it does not matter now. What matters is that the board adopts it, the board approves it, and the board takes ownership of it for the purpose of sustainability. So it is very, very critical. It does not matter. It can be drafted by the board, it can be drafted by the management. It is for the company. But the board has a responsibility with respect to short-term and long-term plan and strategy of the organization.
Okay, talking about appointments into the board of directors.
Yes.
The Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance of 2018 also recommend that factors such as the strengths and weaknesses of the existing board, integrity, you mentioned integrity while you were talking the other time, the required competence and skills, knowledge and experience among others should be considered in the appointment of directors.
Yes.
Now, why do you think these factors are that important in the appointment of directors in the organization?
These are very, very critical factors that has to be considered. Integrity is never about perfection. Integrity is about honesty. And if you have people in the board that are not honest, what kind of board do you have? In some cases, we have had situations where you don't even have board at all, and the company is running businesses of 100 million in this country. We have a situation where somebody collects depositors' money to the tune of billion. No director, no anybody, no. It's only himself and the wife, and now they are at large. They are nowhere to be found, and that is why the code ensures, provides that anybody that will be appointed to the board should be of a person of incorruptible integrity, people of value, people that are very, very honest in their dealings and so on. And that is why it is very, very critical today that anybody that is going to be appointed into any board, there should be background check. There should be screening to ensure that this person does not have a court case pending, does not have fraudulent practices attached to his name, doesn't have any conviction of any court of competent jurisdiction in the country, that the person basically has had a record that is bereft of any form of fraudulent and activities. So it is very, very important that you have such a board. And when you have such a board, then you can now begin to talk about progress and so on. When you have a bunch of criminals come together to form organization and so on, of course, you know the result. And so we have seen it all over the place. And that is why it is very, very important. And we are saying that people that brings people together to the board also, they must ensure that there is screening. They must ensure that they can be non-executive directors, they can be shadow director, they can be whatever director that you want to bring them in, but you must ensure that you conduct background check to ensure that those people, they have incorruptible integrity nature, people that are honest, people that can add value to the organization. It is very, very important, and code so provides for it.
Okay, it is important to have a background check to ensure that the right people are on the board.
Absolutely.
Now, why is the concept of diversity of the board so important also in the appointment of board of their directors?
This is very, 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 very critical. When you have one-sided board, it's like you have a bird flying with one wing. If you have a bird flying with one wing, how long can it go? And that is why you have every shade of opinion, shade of ethnics, shade of professionals coming together to form a particular board. It is very, very important. And the issue of gender mainstreaming is very, very critical. When you have a board, everybody on that board, they are male. You can see that you are basically shortchanging yourself. There are a lot of ideas, a lot of insights that can come from female counterparts and so on. But we don't have that benefit. Look at our National Assembly as it was. I must say it also that National Assembly is the board of any nation. In our National Assembly, you have only 1% of the female there. In House of in Senate, you have less than 1%.
But National Assembly is not by appointment; it's by election.
Yeah, it can be by election. Even board is said, but people form the board. People come to board by election.
Okay.
And I'm saying that the National Assembly of any nation is the board of that nation. It's the same thing. So we are saying that in every board there should be diverse kind of ethnic, professionalism, gender. There should be balancing, and that will make that board to be a complete board. I must say that if the board is one-sided, it's not a complete board. If you have a board that you only have male, it's not a complete board. If you have only females, it's not a complete board. You must have a board that is populated by people of diverse ethnic background of knowledge, background of wisdom, experience from so many other fields and so on. They come together and they put everything together. They cross-fertilize ideas based on issues that are balanced. I mean, it is very, very critical. And I think the code is very, very right in that particular order. Very, very, very great provision for us. And it's a great example for us to adhere to. It is very, very important.
Okay, let me go back to the Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance a bit. The Nigerian Code of Corporate Governance, just like many other corporate governance codes, insists that a single person should not be the managing director, chief executive officer, and the chairman of the organization. Why do you think they insist on one single person should not be?
You cannot be a judge in your own case. It is not possible for you to be a judge in your own case. And this is very, very pertinent. You cannot be the chairman and the CEO. Of course, it was done in those days when enlightenment are totally far away. But now we are in an enlightened era. This is the era that things has to be done in a proper way. You cannot be a judge in your own case. You cannot be the chairman of the company and at the same time you are CEO of that company. We have a lot of examples. In fact, up to today, people are still violating it. You still see people, you see it, you read it on the newspaper where somebody write that I'm the chairman and CEO. Essentially, what he fails to understand is that that business has separated legal entity with him. What confuses them is the fact that because I'm the one that goes to Corporate Affairs Commission to register the business, I must be the chairman, I must be the executive of that business. It doesn't go that way. You must have to be one. You cannot be the referee and at the same time player. It is not possible. So you have to be one. It is either you are chairman or you are CEO. You cannot be the two at the same time. In fact, it doesn't go with logic. It does not go with common sense. It does not go with intuition. So you have to look at it and are determined to have one. And we also encourage many businesses now, including small-scale businesses, to have board, to set up a board, so that that person that has gone to register the business either falls into the category of the chairman or he falls into the category of CEO. You can't be two at the same time. That's why we're encouraging so many. In fact, the institute also is encouraging so many entrepreneurs now to have a board, to have a structure, to have a governance scheme in place so that organization can run well. So that after even the demise of the owner, the business can continue to run. In Nigeria, how many businesses can continue to run after the demise of the owner? In this case, there was a time I listed about 100 companies in Nigeria. I can list them. You know, you discover that as soon as the owner goes to burial ground, the business goes to burial ground with him. So there has to be separation of the owner from the business itself. You need die with your business. You don't have any reason. The business can continue after you. That's why the business I told you about in Japan, they are still in existence. The owners, I'm talking about 1,500 years. They have long gone. You see a lot of businesses also. We saw one in Ireland, in France, I think in Britain as well, one in America and so on, that have crossed 1,000 years, and they're still running. And the structure of the business continue because there is separation of everything that needed to be separated. There is accountability, there is separation of power, there is role play, and there is acts potentials, attitude, skill, and knowledge to ensure that great successor through ask is appointed to continue the business after the demise of the owner. Look at our businesses here. After the demise of the owner, maybe 3 years, 4 years after everybody share the money, and that's the end of the business. It can never
Okay. What are the dangers if the board of directors micromanages the management?
I've had that experience in quite a number of places where the chairman will come and he employs cleaners himself, the chairman of the company.
No, they are separated now.
Yes.
But if they micromanages this.
Yes, it still happen. It still happen even in bastion of professional practice. It still happen where the chairman comes and dictate to the CEO what he will do, comes daily to resume in the office. Chairman comes daily to resume and to tell them to this is how to do, this is the way to do. He sits down at their recruitment table, talking to cleaner. He calls the staff. He comes to the office, calls the staff, without even recourse to the CEO of the organization. Or they come to there is danger in that. Everybody must have their own role. There has to be separation. There has to be boundaries. The board must have their boundaries. The executive must have their boundary. By the time the board comes and they usurp the role of the executive, there is danger in that. In fact, it will affect the earth. It will affect the energy. It will affect the way the business will be run. We have had to contend with it at a point in our career and so on. This is not too good for any organization to have a situation where the board will come, micromanages the executive and so on. So everybody should have their own role, and there should be no usurpation of role. In fact, I was laying it down at that time that board is not superior to management. The only thing is that everybody have their own role. Is that it's like when you have National Assembly of Nigeria and you have the Presidency of Nigeria. One is not superior to anyone. And only that every of these unit has their own role to play for the furtherance, for the progress of the organization or institution as it were.
Thank you very much, Dr. Olufemi Mosaku-Jojnson, for sharing your thoughts on the role of the board as entrepreneurial and strategic leadership.
Thank you so much.
And this is where we are going to draw the curtain on today's episode. I hope you enjoyed the conversation. And we invite you to join us again next week, same station, same time. And on behalf of my producer, Adeboye Galabiro, and of course the technical director, David Adepoju, I remain Dr. Tunde Odeyemi. See you next week. Bye for now.
Do you have continuity or association plan for your business?
Has anyone shared the concept of sustainability with you?
What about the need to protect the rights of minority shareholders?
What are those ingredients germane to having effective meetings?
For these and many more, tune into Corporate Governance Platform every Thursday on MITV, your darling station, on DSTV 255 and UHF 43 at 4:30 p.m.
Corporate Governance Platform is your best medium for informative and educative strategies for the practice of the corporate governance profession.
Institute of Chartered Secretaries and Administrators of Nigeria, ICSAN, the hub of governance professionals.